The Hub is presented to you by Calvo Enterprises, Inc.
Howdy and welcome to The Hub. I'm Nestor DeCanto, and it's my pleasure to welcome our guest this week, former Adjutant General of the Army National Guard, who now is the Homeland Security Advisor, Esther Aguigui, and of course Captain Mark Scott, who is the spokesman for the Guam Army National Guard. Thanks for joining us. We invited you here to talk about, I've been reading up in preparation for the show about all this cybersecurity threats and the Chinese malware, and you guys were both in a more recent article in Politico, and the headline of the article kind of caught my attention: America's potential Achilles heel in a cyber battle with China, Guam. But you're here to talk more about a recent event that took place, and maybe you guys can start out by explaining a little bit about that cybersecurity event that drew quite a number of people.
Sure, and first of all, Nestor, thanks for the invitation to appear here, and also with my esteemed colleague Mark, who I've known for a very long time, as we were both members in the National Guard. But you know, I'm going to cede to Mark because he was actually the one who first talked about this Guard-sponsored event, which was held in July. So.
Yeah, thanks for that, ma'am. It's hard not to call you General, but thanks for that, ma'am. And thanks, Nestor, for having us on.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's correct, and it's something that most of us have known for some time, that the battle space of the future is going to include the cyberspace as well. It's something that the governor has been kind of with a sense of urgency about for some time now, for us to get together on the same page here in Guam and develop a plan to protect us in that cyberspace. So after Typhoon Mawar, I think we all had a chance to see what some of the possible effects are when our internet goes down, our telecom goes down.
Sure.
Again, even the governor herself mentioned in her opening remarks that it was frustrating for her to see what the first responders are doing and what's the status of everything after the storm, because there's no connectivity.
Yeah.
So that, together with the possibility of state actor threats that we're facing here, kind of at the forward edge, right, in the strategic region, it kind of prompted us as a Guam Guard through our IT section, which is Colonel Bum Park and Major Plamen Rubino, and of course our team down there, to facilitate this meeting, to get everyone together at the table and start talking about what are we going to do to work together to improve our cyber defense.
Yeah. And who were some of the folks that showed up for this? Because it was quite a gathering, yeah?
Right. So it was intended to be a small group of people, and it kind of expanded on its own as we found out that there are a lot more stakeholders than we previously thought when it comes to cyber. First and foremost being our friends at Guam Homeland Security. That would be the Gov Guam agency to help the island as a whole look after our cyber. And then we also had Indo-PACOM, Pacific Fleet Cyber Command. And this is the big cyber command out of DC. The FBI was here, CISA, which is the Cyber Security Infrastructure Security Agency. Some of our private sector and Gov Guam partners were also there. So it was a big room full of about 100 people, all interested in this conference.
Yeah, and that's just an indication of just how critical this issue has become. Can you give us some insight from the Homeland Security perspective? You know, what are your top concerns?
Sure. So my top concerns are always going to be the governor's top concerns, which cybersecurity is her number one security concern. So in addition to not only Guam Homeland Security, we also have another government of Guam agency. It's called the Office of Technology, who was also an integral part in collaborating with the exercise that happened in July. And then not only the Office of Technology, but within the Guam Homeland Security, there's also the Mariana Region Fusion Center. And we have intel analysts in the Fusion Center. There are law enforcement individuals who look at information, and they report on maybe possible threats to the island. And they were actually instrumental in devising what we now are going to be very proud to announce very soon, which is the Islandwide cybersecurity plan, which is a whole of government approach to addressing any cyber threats that the island may experience, and not only for the island but in our region as well. So Guam Homeland Security has the task of addressing any cybersecurity platform and any threats that could eventually affect the data systems and the data that the government of Guam contains.
Yeah, in reading up ahead of the show, most of the reports, the national and international reports, were focused on the defense vulnerabilities, but at the same time, there's also the civilian vulnerabilities, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Nestor. So the plan, this island-wide cybersecurity plan, is a collaborative effort between the government of Guam, the private industry, businesses, so that we could all work together to identify threats, and then but more importantly, we identify possible solutions to address those threats. Because we can no longer fight alone or win alone. We must do it together.
That's right. And one of the unique challenges of the cyberspace is that there's no more inside, outside the fence. When it comes to the bases, the military, public, private, all the stakeholders, the internet and the airwaves kind of break down all those barriers because we're interdependent on each other when it comes to internet service providing and telecommunications. So when General Aguigui talks about working together as a team, having interoperability, developing a plan as a team, that's why it's important, because we can't plan in these silos anymore. In other words, these individual plans that are independent of each other, because we all rely on the same internet.
Sure, we're all in the same kind of cyberspace, right?
That's right.
And as you mentioned earlier, I mean, you could just throw communications in there now, because when we speak of recovery or resilience, it's always, power, water, but I think you can throw communications in there too. I mean, just as critical. I mean, we got a big 3 now instead of a big 2, right? After a natural disaster or a storm or anything of that sort, we always talk about power, water. Now we got to add communications in there.
Sure, and even keeping in mind that some of those utilities like power and water depend on connectivity as well.
Yeah. Going back to that article, there was one passage that's kind of stood out to me. They referenced the Microsoft report, and I don't know how much you guys can talk about this, but the Microsoft report made clear the serious cyber threats facing Guam's networks, detailing how Chinese state-sponsored hacking group Volt Typhoon, which has become very, notorious these days, targeted unnamed critical infrastructure organizations on the island, including those in communications, maritime, and government sectors. And this month, Microsoft detailed how 3 Chinese government-affiliated hacking groups, 3 now, are working to target the U.S. Defense Industrial Base in Guam, in particular satellite and telecoms groups, and I imagine that's probably NICTAMs they're talking about. So is there anything you can shed light on with regard to that? I know it's going to be limited, but...
Sure. Well, the light I can shed, which I am going to say now, is, the details of the report just justifies and validates Governor Leon Guerrero's urgency to have a cybersecurity plan in place and to corroborate with all our partners, whether it be our local and state, our federal partners, our business partners, our community partners. It's that vital to have this plan, so that we have to be prepared. A man-made, a natural, or even a biological hazardous incident requires preparedness and readiness. And this island-wide cybersecurity plan will address some of those readiness issues. It will be a living document. So as we go along and as we find new things that we need to add to the plan, we will definitely explore that and add to that. In addition to that, also we also are making sure that we look at any antiquated practices and outdated information and make those changes as well.
Yeah, it almost has to be a living document because of the technological advances constantly, right?
It evolves very quickly,
Yeah.
and something that might have made you an expert in IT a few years ago is out the window as new technologies like AI develops, and there's a lot of things happening in the virtual world that's just moving at the speed of light. So the relevance is a real challenge, and the living document is the way forward.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, and kind of scary as well.
Yes, and if I may add, so this cybersecurity is really it may be a phenomenal term right now, but I must say, just being from the National Guard, it's nothing new to the National Guard. The National Guard has been looking at cybersecurity for a very, very long time, and we, as an island, we turn to the National Guard to give us, that guidance and that subject matter expertise to help guide us through the process. And I know that the Guam National Guard, we have a nice footprint that's there to help our community address and get through cyber hygiene, cyber attacks, basically just cybersecurity. So I need to mention that, and they need to be recognized for the effort that they bring to this fight, because they have been looking down this rat hole for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and the threat continues to grow. On that note, we got to take a quick break. We will be back with more of The Hub right after this. Welcome back to The Hub. I'm Nestor Lecanto. I'm joined, of course, by former Adjutant General Esther Aguigui, who is now the Homeland Security Advisor, and Captain Mark Scott, who's the spokesman for the Guam National Guard. Before we took a break, we were talking about cybersecurity, of course, but Mark, you came up with a really good question. How can the public be involved in this, and what do they need to be aware of?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, Nestor. And there's a lot that everyone can do. As we were talking about before, it's going to take a team to defend our cyberspace. And we talk about the defense of Guam and the Marianas, which is our new Adjutant General, Brigadier General Mike Cruz's first priority is the defense of Guam and the Marianas. It's going to take us all, not just a whole of military or whole of government, whole of community. So when we talk about what can regular folks do, maybe an employee of the government or not, maybe a local business owner, to do their part to beef up our cybersecurity defense here on Guam, there's a whole bunch. Something Esther mentioned was something called cyber hygiene. There's best practices when surfing the web, when checking your email, when opening attachments, when not to open attachments, when to recognize something might be a phishing scam or some kind of a scheme that could steal your personal identification, what sites to visit and not, when to use your credit card. And these are all things that we can research on our own. There's ways that employers can help their employees understand how to use the internet while at work, how to avoid some of these pitfalls that we can fall into as normal folks. There's other more technical things too that government agencies or private companies can look at to improve their cyber defense, such as what we do in the military and at Homeland, which is have our little ID card plug into a computer and then you put in a password. That's called two-factor authentication. It doesn't have to be that expensive. It's just a little plastic card, and that eliminates a lot of the problems that we see in the cyberspace by having something that you have, which is the card, and something that you know, which is a password. Eliminate a lot of opportunities for bad actors to get into that network. So a lot of it comes down to just the motivation of the individuals or employers to get their people spun up, to have some training. There's free online stuff. You could probably go to YouTube and learn a lot, and to educate our workforce on how to keep us all safer.
Yeah, and in fact, some of the reports that I saw and has not been really, it's been really kept low key here in Guam of civilian targets. The hospital was one. I don't know if that's been confirmed. Another telecommunication company, that was another apparent victim of this cyber hacking. So what can businesses do to protect themselves further, and how can they come to, for example, Homeland Security and ask for some advice?
Sure. Well, to answer your first question, what can businesses do? Businesses can invest in a workforce. Businesses can invest in upgrading systems. Businesses can also practice cyber hygiene. Changing passwords every so often. That's one of the key cyber hygiene practices that a lot of people don't necessarily like to do, because a lot of it has to do with memory. And if you have 25 different passwords, you're going to be reluctant to change those 25 passwords. But changing those passwords protects the information, the data that you have. Avoiding having to write your password down. I know that's common practice, but if there's a way for you to keep that in another means, then we encourage that you change passwords. You invest in upgrading systems. You invest in the workforce necessary to address cyber attacks. And I've said this before many times. A cyber attack will require a different type of first responder. A cyber attack will not necessarily be entertained by a police officer. A cyber attack will not necessarily be sent to a firefighter. A cyber attack will likely be addressed to an IT professional. So if we build our workforce to empower, businesses, government agencies, even in our own homes, you become a little bit proficient on information technology, and then you'll be better equipped to entertain a cyber attack.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. And in fact, I read that they employ or they recruit hackers themselves
Yes.
to attack a system to find what its vulnerabilities are, right?
Yeah, talking about pen testing or penetration testing, it's a real common practice in the corporate world just to see how secure their systems are. Banks is a common example here. I know they practice that. They'll hire a company to come in and see what they could do if they were to hack. And you can learn a lot. You can glean a lot of lessons learned about your vulnerabilities. Something we also do in the military quite often. So that is another option, in the private
Yes.
sector,
Yes.
just to, practice and test just like how we do everything else.
Yeah. Getting a annual training on just basic cybersecurity awareness. If companies could make that a mandatory requirement for all employees, like we do in the Guard, if you do not update your information assurance certification, you automatically get booted out of the system, and you will not be allowed back on the system until you go in and you renew your membership to
Yeah.
that. And so, little practices like that could go a long way.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. For example, for us to be on our network in the military requires a yearly online training and some other forms that refreshes every year and keeps the employees up to date. So as these new technologies evolve, example is AI evolves, that's going to present new threats to just regular people at home surfing the web or people online at work trying to do their thing. It's just another way forward to help keep our workforce and our community educated on what they can do on an individual level.
I wanted both of you to kind of respond to this headline, which says, implies that Guam is the Achilles heel for the U.S. military defense, right? Department of Defense, that cyber security wise, Guam is the Achilles heel because, as Microsoft reported, the Chinese malware was discovered here. What's your response to that? Is Guam truly the Achilles heel, or is that a little bit overblown?
Well, I'll respond to that first. Guam is the tip of the spear. Guam has set standards that other states have emulated, and just because of who we are and where we're located makes us a strategic place to live. The blessing with that, Nestor, is that because we are in a strategic place to live, and because we are a close-knit community and family, we take care of one another, and our defenses outweigh any other type of offenses that I think any other attacker might want to think about. So, I'd like to still believe that we are the tip of the spear, and because we are actually the homeland. No matter how you look at it, you're coming from the east, going to the west. We are part of the second island chain, and because we are in the second island chain, we become the first line of defense. And if you were to reverse that, coming from the west, looking to the east, we are the last point of contact. So no matter which way you look at it, Guam's position here,
right there.
and it is where America's Day begins, but it is also where America's Day could end.
Yeah. Mark, did you take a little exception to that headline?
No, I think it's good to call attention to any kind of vulnerability where we can improve, because we can always improve. And there might have been potential for us to be a Achilles heel had we not done what we're doing now. As our current tag, General Mike Cruz says, we're the native defenders of our homeland. We're the only National Guard in the second island chain. So the way we responded to this back in July by hosting the cyber conference, bringing all the stakeholders to the table and clarifying a way forward, I think removes the potential for us to be the vulnerability. In fact, I think it makes us be the strength, because this formula, this model that we have with our whole of community approach, with everyone coming to the table, is something that other people are modeling. Right? We're kind of leading the way and setting the tone forward to bring in the community partners, the government partners, and the military together and work on this cyber defense plan as a whole.
All
So
right.
I think it's a strength.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, we've got to take one more break, and we'll be back with more of The Hub. Please stay with us. And welcome back. I'm Nestor Licanto, and joined once again by former Adjutant General Esther Aguigui, now the Homeland Security Advisor, and Captain Mark Scott, spokesman for the Guam Army National Guard. We were talking a little bit earlier about what's at stake for the civilian community, but to the average person, how concerned should they be, or should they even be concerned? Start with you, General.
Everyone should be concerned. Cyber has no boundaries, and the scary thing about cyber is no one owns it. Nobody owns cyber. So it's you could be a victim at any given time. So which is why, doing simple things like cyber hygiene, knowing your surroundings, knowing what's on your electronic devices, knowing what the capabilities are with the new phenomenon called artificial intelligence. Knowing all that already protects you from any kind of attack.
Yeah.
I think there's a right amount of concern. There's a right amount of concern that helps you prepare, right? To ignore it all the way would be a little irresponsible, but then to worry too much may not be productive either. So I think a healthy amount of attention to the details of what's happening in cyber, a healthy amount of changing your passwords, checking your bank accounts, learning what types of traps are there for you in your inbox and online is a healthy amount of concern that we can all do. It's something that we can control. Right now, when it comes to other state actors or hacking groups, less in our control, less to worry about. But to focus on the things we can control, I think, is a healthy amount of concern.
Yeah, and going forward, what can we expect, and especially when it comes to as the Marine Corps and the military, ramps up even more on Guam? Is there something that we need to watch out for with regard to that? Do you think?
Well, I think the good thing to know is that we can look forward to stronger partnerships, more resilient communities, a better collaboration with not only our state and local and federal partners, but ways to look at cyber differently, and a variety of solutions that come with it.
Yeah. Hey, what does the National Guard have planned going forward?
Yep. So what you saw in July, Nestor, with that cyber workshop is just the beginning. There have already been things that have happened since then, such as our state partnership with the Philippines. The Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Guam Guard has a state partnership relationship where we will go there, they will come here, and we'll exchange best practices with cyber, but also with medical and leadership and other things. That's been going on. There are regional exercises called Orient Shield. There's other cyber exercises in the states that we attend to improve our skills. And the next one of these cyber workshops here in Guam with all of our partners is already scheduled for the first week in November. So it's not a one-time deal. It's the first step in a scaffold where we're going to continually build, bring in more partners in our region, bring in more partners from the community to make this thing stronger and stronger as we go.
Yeah, I think you guys mentioned the fact that we're bringing in more regional participation, Australia, New Zealand, and General, you mentioned that we are, part of this second chain. Maybe you could explain what that is to people who might not be familiar with it, because that has some historical significance. The first island chain, second island chain.
Sure, I'd be happy to. But before that, I'd also like to spin off on something that Mark talked about on what type of activities are being conducted now. So it just happens to be National Preparedness Month for Department of Homeland Security. So September is the month that we use to celebrate and conduct, activities throughout the month to focus on preparedness. In fact, today we have a team down at the Inalahan Senior Citizen Center teaching our Manamco on how to respond to all hazards, to all emergencies. And the team just happens to be, focused on our Manamco and help them, learn how to be prepared, learn how to deal with, disasters, hazards. So we're going to continue that, and it's never ending. We're going to make sure that these types of activities are available to the community. So to your second question about the second island chain, that's a term that's frequently used in the military. And if you just look on the map of the world and bring it over to the Western Pacific, you will see a series of islands. And the first island chain will be comprised of Japan, and Taiwan, and Okinawa.
And that's in the proximity to China.
Yes,
correct? Okay.
right, in proximity to China. Then beyond that first island chain, you have the second island chain, which involves Guam, the CNMI, And so those are what we call, lines of effort. So that will describe what the second island chain is. It's a term that's mostly used by our military, just to identify a place on the map.
All right. And in terms of the communications and the cybersecurity, it's a very critical part of protecting the United States mainland, yes?
As we saw in Typhoon Mawar, it was very difficult to try to get messages, to try to know what everyone was doing when we were paralyzed with our communication systems that weren't functioning like they normally do. We were paralyzed with the fuel, and it wasn't because of the lack of fuel. It was the ability to dispense the fuel. And because the residents didn't know what was going on, they saw lines at gas stations, and the immediate thought was, we must be out of fuel. I'm just going to go get gas. And so that was a very difficult. That was very difficult to look at, but we managed to get through. And I think the key to that was the messaging. Again, with the communications, it used to be a service. Now it is a utility.
Okay. And speaking of messaging, we do have to wrap up, but I wanted to give you both an opportunity to kind of wrap up and explain what you think, how you think Guam is faring in terms of cybersecurity and awareness.
Yeah, thanks, Nestor. We're definitely pointed in the right direction. We have all the players at the table, and everyone's on board to put in the work that we need to do to get there. The signs of it already started at the last cyber conference. We're looking forward to more attendance, and there's positive feedback. We have all the support from Indo-PACOM, Cyber Command, and our local partners as well to move this thing forward and to improve steadily but surely as we go.
And Esther, final word?
Well, final words is, cybersecurity is the absolute right thing to do, whether it be at home, whether it be in your business, whether it be at your place of work. Be aware, be vigilant, be resilient, and protect not only your place of work, protect your family, and welcome the partnerships that come with protecting our island and our people.
Homeland Security Advisor Esther Aguigui, Captain Mark Scott of the National Guard. I'm Nestor Lecanto. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you again next week on The Hub.